So they've appointed the locusts to oversee the farm, the fox to independently evaluate the hen house. Yes, in the wake of the targeted assassination of Zomi Frankcom and 6 other aid workers, the inevitable Israel whitewash of the incident, Hamas made me do it. They have appointed a director of the missile multinational company BAE Systems, the defence contractor, a director of the defence contractor in Australia to head up the independent inquiry into these assassinations or unfortunate, regrettable incidents, depending on whose view you take. Yes, it's Mark Binskin. Get in the Binskin, the former Air Force chief and chief steward of the bombing campaigns in Iraq and elsewhere in the Middle East. Naturally, the mainstream media missed this glaring conflict of interest when they were rewriting the government press release faithfully this week. But here he is, the former defence chief, the dude who benefits personally from the extraordinary demand for weapons, which has spiked share prices of defence contractors in the wake of the Israel genocide in Gaza, and fear-mongering over China too, of course. Huge beneficiaries there. Director, BAE Systems Australia. Now, there's an old saying in journalism, when it comes to foreign wars and newspaper catastrophe coverage or war coverage, how much space in the newspaper is devoted in column inches to their coverage. And the rule of thumb runs something like this. It's 1 Australian for every 1,000 Africans, every 500 Asians, every 100 Europeans, and every 10 Brits, Yanks, or Kiwis, depending on how we are doing in the Bledisloe Cup. What is it with Gaza? What is it with the Palestinians? Is it 33,000 to 1? We've seen this principle in action over the past week with Zomi Frankcom. Finally, some page 1 treatment, some outrage, some clearer vision on what is actually transpiring over there. Some coverage which does not, for once, pander to the genociders in too great a degree. They're still having IDF spokesmen on the ABC, etc., lying their heads off. This is all because an Aussie was murdered. She is, however, and we absolutely emphasise this, a martyr. She is an aid worker who selflessly helped feed the deliberately starved people of Gaza. She, unlike our bemedalled and decorated Defence Force chiefs, bombing people from the air, she is a true hero who paid the ultimate price. Unlike our feeble political and media elites, too cowed to even put their own careers in jeopardy to oppose war crimes, genocide, they are laughing at us too. Israel's ambassador, when called in to explain the incident in the wake of the murders, when called to do some actual work for a change rather than having nicey nice meetings and fancy lunches and dinners, he took a sickie. The Israel ambassador to Australia took a sickie. He was AWOL that day after the Frankcom murders. Once, just once, there could have been some accountability. But, of course, what do you do when it comes to accountability? You have an inquiry, hence the Binskin inquiry. But now, Rafah invasion is on course. Peak slaughter in a devastated refugee camp full of children. That is the next step because the Egypt peace talks have just failed. Israel will not agree to stop the invasion of Rafah, where they're all huddling in desperate circumstances, half of them children. Israel will not agree to a permanent ceasefire. Netanyahu does not want this war to end. The deal was, let's have a permanent ceasefire and exchange hostages on both sides. The 1,000 held, often wrongly, in Israel, thousands of Palestinians and the 100 or so Israeli hostages tragically still interred with Hamas. Genocide Joe and the AUKUS genocide apologists, that's Pentagon Penny and Neville Chamberlain Albo and Marshall Petain, Peter Dutton, ever more impotent apparently. They can't stop weapons sales, they say. And Iran. Israel's trying to drag Iran into a conflict to blow the whole shop up. Iran, its position, having had its embassy bombed by Netanyahu in Syria, which is akin to literally a bombing of Iran, peaceably and reasonably said it would not retaliate to Israel's aggression if Israel agreed not to decimate Rafah. All this against the background of rising demonstrations by Israelis in Tel Aviv against the government to get rid of this butcher, Netanyahu, and get the hostages back. And still, here in Australia's Future Fund, it's pusillanimous board of guardians who decide what investments our sovereign wealth fund should make. Here they are, hiding, these chicken-hearted board of guardians, when it comes to responding to questions from yours truly as to why it remains invested, our future fund, in Elbit Systems, the very merchant of death, Israel's largest bomb maker, whose drones murdered Zomi Frankcom and the 6 other innocents. We invest in this stuff, apparently. And now we see this in respect to the other Elbit deal, the awarding of a plush $900 million weapons contract with Australia. We see this. Australia's Defence Department has refused to publicly release a copy of the deal struck with Israel on defence industry cooperation because it could, quote, harm Australia's international standing and reputation. Too late. It's in the toilet. But what could we do? What could Australia possibly do? This is a global affair. Well, we could send the Israel ambassador packing. We could recall our ambassador to Israel. We could stop selling weapons parts to the Netanyahu regime. We could join the other 60-odd countries which are party to the ICJ proceedings in The Hague. We could pay heed to international law, laws against war crimes, the Geneva Convention. We could simply do the right thing. Instead, what do our two-party posse of patsies, of genocide enablers do? In fear of their donations, their career paths, in fear of being labelled anti-Semitic by the nutjob Netanyahu lobby in Australia, they prefer to side with a racist cabal of white supremacist mass murderers who have themselves, and this is important, as we said last November, who have themselves been the chief cause of the rise in anti-Semitism. What a grand irony. The upshot, we ourselves and America have shot dead America's authority and prestige in the world. Where are the meetings at Camp David, the peace accords? We've sunk Australia's standing across the globe. We played straight into the hands of China and the BRICS, put the world at the brink of war again, all because of cowardice. And we've erased all goodwill, of course, for Israel itself. We have been party to that. The war, as they call it, which it's not, the war is lost. Israel has lost. America has lost. It does not matter how many more innocents they murder, how they cry, Hamas made me do it, how they wail about their own victimhood. They have lost. And just to slather some icing on this grotesque cake, a US military honcho this week said, well, he let the cat out of the bag on our AUKUS commitments. The US Deputy Secretary of State, Kurt Campbell, quote, confirms that Washington would not transfer the jewels in its crown nuclear-powered submarines if it did not have ultimate say over their operational use. We are mere craven puppets. Therefore, we're locked in for the next war, be that against China over Taiwan or in the Middle East. The directly, quoting this guy again, this directly countermanded statements by the Australian government that Australian sovereign control over the use of submarines would be maintained. We have committed to pay $370 billion to the US and the UK to fire up jobs and growth for those economies, not ours. For them, we're paying for them to dump their nuclear waste on our shores, to become entangled in a potentially apocalyptic military venture against China or Iran to help to rebuild their shipyards. This is the price of our AUKUS alliance. Will young Australians die for the craven decisions of politicians? Not only craven, but illogical. Yes, if we go to war, Australians will die. Not the generals or the politicians, but young men and women. And that's only counting Australians. That's not counting the people we're going to bomb from the air. All we had to do is do the right thing. Instead, like the lily-livered, impressionable little kid in the playground, we have struck a Faustian pact with the gang of bullies, the dumb gang of bullies. Please like, share, comment in the space below.